The moment my future sister-in-law looked me up and down and whispered to her mother, "Is she seriously wearing that?" loud enough for me to hear, I knew exactly how this night was going to go, and I knew exactly how it was going to end. She just didn't know that yet. My brother Eli had been dating Priscilla Holt for 2 years. I'd never met her in person. We'd exchanged maybe 4 text messages total, all of them logistical. What time does your flight land? That kind of thing. I knew from my mom that Priscilla came from money, old money, the kind that has an opinion about everything, especially people it's just met. The graduation party was held at a resort called Whitfield Pines, about 40 minutes outside of Nashville. It was a Saturday in late May, the kind of evening where the air still holds heat from the afternoon, and the fireflies are just starting to show up in the tree line. My cousin Willa had finished her nursing degree, and our whole extended family had come in for it. My aunt and uncle had rented out the main event space at the resort. I'd driven up from Atlanta. I was tired from the drive and I'd changed in the parking lot because my original dress had gotten a coffee stain on it somewhere around Chattanooga. So I was wearing a backup outfit. Dark jeans, a silk blouse, loafers. Not dressed up. Not dressed down. Just dressed. Priscilla was wearing a floor-length white wrap dress at someone else's graduation party. So I should have known from the jump what kind of person I was dealing with. Her mother, a woman named Margot, which she pronounced with the full weight of someone who expects you to be impressed by the sound of it, looked me over at the same moment. She pressed her lips together and said nothing, which somehow felt worse than if she had. I smiled, said hi to Eli, hugged him. He looked happy, he looked a little nervous, the way he always does when he wants different parts of his life to get along. "This is Priscilla," he said. "I know," I said. "So nice to finally meet you." She smiled with her mouth and not her eyes and said, "Ely talks about you. He says you're in real estate." I said, "Something like that." She tilted her head. "Residential. I have a friend who does residential in Buckhead. Very competitive right now." "Commercial," I said. "Oh." She looked back at her mother. Something passed between them. I watched it happen and filed it away. The party moved inside around 7. The Whitfield Pines main ballroom is a beautiful room, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, tall windows that look out over the back lawn where the resort has these old-growth oak trees strung with Edison lights. I have always loved that room. I knew every inch of it. I got a drink and found my cousin Willa, who was radiant and overwhelmed and wearing a crown her friends had made her out of paper flowers. We talked for a while about her plans. She'd already accepted a position at Vanderbilt University Medical Center and was looking at apartments in East Nashville. I was proud of her in the way you're proud of someone you've watched grow up, where the pride has this particular weight to it, because you remember who they were before they became who they are. At some point, Eli materialized at my elbow and said quietly, "Hey, so Priscilla's family is going to be joining us for dinner. Is that okay?" I looked at him. "It's Aunt Ruthie's party, not mine. I know, but I just want everyone to get along." "Ellie," I said. "Have I said anything?" He exhaled. "No, you haven't. Thank you. What I didn't say was, I had noticed things, little things." Margot had commented to one of my aunts that the centerpieces were charming, in a homespun way. Priscilla had asked my cousin Dex what he did for work, and then visibly lost interest when he said he managed a tire shop. Her father, a barrel-chested man named Fowler, had spent the first 20 minutes of the party on his phone and the next 20 describing to anyone who would listen the vacation home they'd recently finished renovating in Hilton Head. They were the kind of people who needed you to know they had things. I understood that type. I'd spent years doing business with that type. I sat down for dinner next to my mom. The seating had been arranged in a big horseshoe of round tables, and our family took up most of it. Priscilla's family, herself, her parents, and her younger brother, a soft-spoken kid named Tatum who seemed embarrassed by all of them, was seated at the table nearest the head where my aunt and uncle were. The speeches started. My aunt cried. Willa cried. Dex told a story about the time Willa had set off the smoke alarm trying to make him a birthday cake at 2 in the morning when she was 16, and the whole room laughed. Then Fowler stood up. He hadn't been asked to. He just stood up, tapped his glass, and waited for the room to quiet. My aunt looked at my uncle. My uncle shrugged. I just want to say a few words, Fowler said, since we're all here getting to know each other. He smiled broadly. Ely has told us so much about this family, and we're grateful to be included in such a warm celebration. He went on. He talked about Priscilla. He talked about the values their family held dear: hard work, excellence, the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. He said that phrase twice: the right people. I kept my face neutral and watched my mum's hand tighten slightly around her water glass. When he sat down, Margot leaned over to Priscilla and said something in a low voice. Priscilla glanced in my direction and laughed softly. I looked down at my plate. After dinner, the room got louder. The tables were pushed back. Someone put on music. My cousin Willa was pulled into a circle of her nursing school friends, and I drifted toward the bar for a club soda because I was planning to drive back to Atlanta later that night. Priscilla appeared next to me. "You've been quiet," she said. "I'm a quiet person," I said. She leaned against the bar with the comfortable ease of someone who is always performing and has forgotten they're doing it. I was trying to remember. "Eli said you're based in Atlanta. What exactly do you do there?" "I own a commercial real estate firm," I said. She blinked once. "You own it?" "Yes." She picked up her glass. "That's interesting. My father's company has done some commercial real estate investment, mostly in Charleston and Savannah. Very different markets." I nodded. "How large is your firm?" she asked, and there was something in her tone. Not quite disbelief, just a particular kind of testing curiosity, the kind that's waiting for you to reveal that you've overstated something. "We manage around 40 properties," I said. "Mixed use, multi-family, some retail." She nodded slowly, the way people do when they're recalibrating. Then her mother appeared. Margot set her hand on Priscilla's shoulder and looked at me with that particular brand of social smile that's more appraisal than warmth. "We were just talking about Eli," she said, which was not true. "He's so devoted to his family." "He is," I said. "It's sweet," she said. "You can tell he's always been the one holding things together." She said it lightly, but the emphasis on he was unmistakable, like he'd been holding things together in spite of something. In spite of me, maybe. I set my club soda down. "Eli is wonderful," I said. "We're close." "Oh, I'm sure," Margot said. She glanced around the room with an air of gender tolerance, like she was a guest at a party she hadn't exactly chosen. "It's just, family events can be complicated, can't they? Different paths, different levels of investment." Priscilla said nothing. She was watching me. I said, "They can be." Margot smiled. "Well, it's lovely that everyone made the effort to be here." And then they drifted away, back toward Fowler, and I stood there at the bar and thought, they don't know. They didn't know a single thing that was actually true about tonight. I'm going to tell you something I haven't told many people. For a long time, I let my family believe I was doing okay-ish, not struggling, but not exceptional either. My mom knew the broad strokes, that I'd started a business, that it was doing well. But the full picture? No. I kept it quiet on purpose, partly because I grew up watching money create distance in families. And I didn't want to become someone my cousins felt weird around. Partly because I was building something I wasn't sure was real yet, and I didn't want to jinx it by talking about it too much. And partly, honestly, because there's a version of privacy that feels like armor, and I'd been wearing it so long, I'd forgotten I had it on. What Priscilla and her family didn't know, what almost no one at that party knew, was that I owned the resort they were standing in, not metaphorically, not as a minor investor. I had acquired Whitfield Pines 18 months earlier as part of a portfolio purchase from a hospitality group that was liquidating their southeast assets. I had been in the process of repositioning it, keeping the existing management team, doing a phased renovation, moving it upmarket. The general manager, a man named Curtis, had been with the property for 11 years and knew it better than anyone. I trusted him completely and largely stayed out of his way. That was the job. You buy right, you put good people in place, you don't meddle. The event coordinator who'd set up my cousin Willa's graduation party. Every detail, the Edison lights in the oak trees, the flower arrangements, the menu, she reported to Curtis, who reported to me. My aunt and uncle had gotten a family rate on the venue without knowing why. I stepped outside through the side door, the one that opens onto the back lawn near the maintenance path. The air was cooler out there. The oak trees were lit up exactly the way I'd asked when I'd toured the property the first time and told Curtis what I thought would make the outdoor spaces more marketable. I called my business partner, a woman named Ingrid, who handled the operational side of our larger assets. "How's the party?" she asked. "Interesting," I said. She knew my family situation well enough to understand what that meant. "The future in-laws, they're a type," I said. She laughed. "You gonna tell them?" "I don't know yet. What I didn't tell Ingrid was that something had been nagging at me since dinner. Fowler, during his uninvited speech, had mentioned that his company had done work in Charleston and Savannah, that he'd been in commercial real estate investment. The way he'd said it, with that particular confidence of someone recounting a track record, had tugged at something in my memory. I went back inside and found Curtis near the service entrance. "Do you know a company called Holt Capital Partners?" I asked him. Curtis's expression shifted in a way that told me the answer before he gave it. "We've had some contact with them," he said carefully. "Before your acquisition. They made an offer on the property about 2 years ago." "What happened?" He paused. "The offer was retracted. There were some concerns raised during due diligence from the seller's side about their operating history at another property they'd held in Savannah. I don't know the details. But the deal fell apart and they moved on." I thanked him and went to find my phone. I'm not going to pretend this felt clean or simple. Part of me wanted to just let the night end. Drive back to Atlanta, send Eli a nice text about the party, let Priscilla and her family fade into the category of people I'd be politely civil to at Christmas. Whatever they thought about me wasn't my problem. I knew what I'd built. I didn't need them to know it. But it wasn't just about me anymore. Eli was planning to marry this woman. Their family was already making itself comfortable, already measuring my family against some internal standard and finding them lacking. And there was something about Fowler's track record, the deal that had fallen apart, the Savannah property, that I needed to understand before my brother got in any deeper. I spent the next 40 minutes on my phone reading. Holt Capital Partners had a paper trail, not a criminal one, at least not that I could find, but a documented one. A management dispute with a commercial tenant in Savannah that had resulted in a civil suit, a complaint filed with the South Carolina Real Estate Commission, a pattern of behavior that looked, from the outside, like a company that was very good at presenting itself as more stable and well-capitalized than it actually was. My stomach felt cold. I went back inside and found Eli. He was standing near the windows with Priscilla, their shoulders touching, looking out at the lit-up trees. He looked happy. He looked the way people look when they're still in the part of the story where everything seems like it's going to work out. I said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" We stepped into the hallway near the courtroom. It was quieter there. "What's wrong?" he said immediately. "Because he knows my face." I told him. Not everything, not the Whitfield Pines thing, not yet. Just what I'd found about Holt Capital Partners. I kept my voice level. I didn't editorialize. I told him what the public record showed, and I told him I thought he should know before he made any more significant life decisions. He was quiet for a long moment. "How did you find this?" he asked. "I looked," I said. "Why were you looking?" I chose my words carefully. "Because I pay attention to people's business histories. It's what I do." And her father mentioned enough specifics that I recognized the name. Eli looked at the floor. Then he said, "She's not her father." "I know," I said. "I'm not saying she is. I'm saying you should know what you're marrying into. That's it." He nodded slowly. He wasn't angry. He was processing, which was the Eli I knew, the one who goes quiet instead of reactive. I squeezed his arm and left him there. When I came back into the ballroom, Fowler was holding court near the bar, telling a story that involved the phrase "my attorney" twice in one sentence. Margot was next to him, laughing at the right moments. Priscilla was looking around the room. When she spotted me, she said something to her mother and walked over. "Ellie looks serious," she said. "We were just talking," I said. She studied me. "About what?" "About plans," I said, which was true enough. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, I looked you up while you were outside." I said, "Okay. Kelleher Commercial Group," she said. "That's you," I said. It is. Her jaw moved slightly. The Kelleher that acquired Whitfield Pines last year. I looked at her steadily. The same. The color shifted in her face. She glanced around the room involuntarily. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, the way people do when they suddenly understand they've been standing inside someone else's house. You own this place, she said, quietly. Not a question. I do, I said. She said nothing for a long moment. I didn't fill the silence. Then she said, "Why didn't you say anything?" "It didn't come up," I said, which was also true. She pressed her lips together. I recognized the expression, not quite embarrassment, not quite anger, something in the uncomfortable middle of both. She was retracing the conversation at the bar. The way she'd said you own it with that half disbelief. The way her mother had talked about investment and right people. "I need to find my mother," she said. She walked away. I watched her cross the room. I watched her reach Margot and say something low and quick. I watched Margot's face go through a short, swift sequence of expressions: dismissal, confusion, recalibration. She looked in my direction. I nodded once, politely, and looked away. Fowler noticed something was happening and came over to his wife. More words were exchanged. He looked at me. Then, with the slightly too casual movement of a man who needs to gather himself, he pulled out his phone. I don't know exactly what he found when he looked me up. Whatever it was enough. They left earlier than expected. Priscilla found Eli, said something about a long drive, said goodnight to my aunt and uncle with practiced graciousness. Fowler shook Eli's hand. Margot kissed the air near my aunt's cheek. I was near the windows when they walked out. My cousin Willa materialized next to me and said, "What happened? Did something happen?" "Nothing important," I said. She narrowed her eyes at me. "You have a look?" "I always have a look." "You have a specific look." She paused. "Is this about Eli's girlfriend's family?" "Priscilla's lovely," I said. Willis nodded. "Her dad gave that speech." "He did," I said. "And?" I looked at my cousin, her paper flower crown slightly askew, her face still flushed with the particular joy of a night that's actually been about her. "And nothing," I said. "Tonight was about you. Go dance." She looked at me for another moment, then grinned and went. Illy found me later when the party was winding down and the catering staff had started clearing the outer tables. He sat down next to me in a chair by the window. "She told me you two talked," he said. "We did." He was quiet. "She said you own the venue." "I do." "You let your aunt book a party at a venue you own and didn't say anything?" "She got a fair rate," I said. "Curtis handled it. I didn't want to make it into a thing." He rubbed his face. "You're a strange person." "I know." "She's embarrassed," he said. "You're a strange person." "I know." "She's embarrassed," he said. "Her parents are embarrassed?" I didn't say anything. "They looked it up," he said. "Kelleher Commercial Group? Our whole portfolio." He paused. "They didn't know. They genuinely didn't know." "I know they didn't know. I know they didn't," I said. He was quiet for a while, watching the remaining guests. The music had gotten quieter. Outside, the Edison lights were still on in the oak trees, golden and still in the warm night. "What you found," he said finally, "about Holt Capital, is it bad?" "It's worth understanding," I said, "before the relationship goes further." "I'll send you what understanding," I said. "Before the relationship goes further. I'll send you what I found. You can decide what to do with it." He nodded slowly. "I'm not trying to blow anything up, Eli," I said. "I'm telling you because no one else would." He turned and looked at me for a moment. "I know," he said. "I found Curtis before I left to thank him for the evening." He walked me out through the side door to where I'd parked. The parking lot was quiet. The last of the Holt family's cars, a large SUV with a Hilton Head Resort parking sticker on the back window, was pulling out onto the main road. "Everything okay with the event?" Curtis asked. "Perfect," I said. "Your team did a beautiful job." He smiled. "That's what we're here for." I drove back to Atlanta with the windows down. Somewhere south of Murfreesboro, the highway gets wide and dark, and you can see the stars if the clouds cooperate. And that night they did. I thought about Eli. I thought about Priscilla, who might be a perfectly good person, still figuring out how much of her parents she'd absorbed. I thought about Willa in her paper flower crown. I thought about my aunt crying during the toast. The real kind of crying where you don't care if your mascara goes. I thought about the version of me who had sat very still at dinner and heard Margot say different levels of investment and said nothing and done nothing and let it pass because that was an option and I'd seriously considered it. And then I thought about Eli's face in the hallway when I told him about Holt Capital Partners. The way he'd gone quiet and still, the way he always does when something matters and he's taking it seriously. That was why I said something. Not because of Margot's smile or Fowler's speech or the look Priscilla gave me over the rim of her glass. Those things were small. People have bad manners all the time. People make assumptions. People look at you and see what they expect to see, and that's fine. You don't have to correct every person who misjudges you, but you do have to show up for your brother. The morning after I got back to Atlanta, I sent Eli a summary document. The civil suit, the commission complaint, the timeline. I attached a short note that said, "I love you. This is just information. Do with it what you think is right." He called me that afternoon. She didn't know, he said, about the Savannah thing. She was in college when it happened. Okay, I said, she's upset that no one told her. That's fair. He was quiet for a moment. She's not like them, he said. But he said it in the voice of someone who is thinking hard about what that means. I know, I said. I think she might not be. And I meant it. I don't know how the story of my brother and Priscilla ends. Maybe she'll turn out to be nothing like her father. Maybe she'll spend years quietly undoing the lessons that house taught her. Maybe Eli will ask better questions and get honest answers. I'm not in the business of predicting people's outcomes. What I know is that I drove to Nashville for my cousin's graduation party, and I wore a coffee-stained backup outfit, and a woman in a white wrap dress looked me over and decided in about 45 seconds what kind of person I was. She wasn't entirely wrong. I am quiet. I am understated. I do let assumptions hang in the air without correcting them usually. But she missed the part where quiet isn't the same as small. And she missed the part where the ground she was standing on, those hardwood floors, those lit-up oak trees outside those tall windows, had my name on the deed. I didn't say it to her like that. I didn't need to. She figured it out herself. And I think that's the version that stays with a person. The thing you figure out yourself when you're already halfway through making the mistake always lands harder than anything someone could say to you. I got back to my desk on Monday morning and there was a coffee from the place downstairs and a stack of due diligence files for a mixed-use property we were considering in Chattanooga. I sat down, I opened the folder, I got to work. Some people need you to know what they have. I've never been one of those people. What I have is mine whether anyone knows about it or not. The work is really the way. The properties are really the way. The name on the deed doesn't change based on who's in the room. I just have to remember that sometimes the right thing is letting people see it anyway, not for me. For the people I love, who deserve to have someone in their corner who's paying attention. That's the only kind of reveal worth making. I've thought about that night a lot since it happened. Not the part where Priscilla figured out who I was. That moment was over in about 30 seconds, and honestly, it wasn't dramatic. She just went quiet. Her face did a small, involuntary thing, and then she said she needed to find her mother. That was it. No scene, no confrontation, just the particular silence of someone recalculating everything they'd already decided. What I keep coming back to is the dinner. Fowler standing up without being asked, talking about the right people, talking about investment and excellence, and the way my mom's hand tightened around her glass. She didn't say anything, she just sat there and absorbed it. That's what my family does. We absorb things. We've been doing it for years. I used to think that was a kind of dignity, and maybe it is, up to a point. But there's a version of staying quiet that stops being graceful and starts being something closer to disappearing. You shrink yourself so other people stay comfortable, and after a while you forget that the shrinking was ever a choice. I didn't reveal what I owned that night to impress anyone. I want to be honest about that. Priscilla found it herself. She looked me up on her phone while I was standing outside making a call, and by the time she walked over to me, she already knew. What I did was simply not deny it. I looked at her and said, "Yes, that's me," and let her sit with what that meant. The harder thing, the thing that actually cost me something, was the conversation in the hallway with Eli. Because that one required me to say something I wasn't sure I had the right to say. He loves her. He's happy. And I walked up to him at his family's party and handed him information that complicated all of it. That's not a comfortable position to be in. You can tell yourself you're doing it out of love and mean it completely and still feel the weight of it. But I think about the alternative. I think about driving back to Atlanta and saying nothing. Letting Eli find out some other way, later, when more was at stake. And I know I couldn't have lived with that version of the night. Not because of Fowler's speech or Margot's smile. Those things were small and they'll fade. But because Eli is my brother and looking out for the people you love sometimes means handing them something uncomfortable and trusting them to be strong enough to hold it. That's the thing about character, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear the right outfit or give the right speech at dinner. It just shows up quietly and does the thing that needed doing, and then it goes home and gets back to work. Priscilla may turn out to be exactly who Eli believes she is. I genuinely hope she does. People are not their parents. They are not their family's worst choices. And the fact that she didn't know about the Savannah situation, that she was in college when it happened, matters. What she does with that information now, how honest she's willing to be with herself and with Eli, that's the real question. That's always the real question. What you choose to do with the truth once you have it is the only thing that actually belongs to you. I drove back to Atlanta with the windows down and the stars out, and by the time I got home, I was just tired, not sad, not angry. Just tired in the way you get after a long day where you did the right thing, which is somehow more exhausting than the days when you don't. Monday morning came. There was coffee. There were files. There was work to do. I sat down and did it. That's what building something real looks like from the inside. Not the reveal, not the moment someone finally sees you clearly. Just the ordinary Tuesday morning after, when you're still the same person you were before anyone was paying attention.